All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webcast entitled Changing the Narrative, Requesting and Creating Better Content. My name is Court Campion, and I'm the Director of Marketing here at OmniUpdate. For those of you unfamiliar with OmniUpdate, we provide a best-in-class web content management system designed for the unique needs of higher education. With nearly 20 years of industry experience and the largest user community of higher ed web professionals just like you, we are the leader in the higher ed commercial CMS space. Today's webcast will be led by Eric Odom, a web developer at Augusta University. He will focus on how to create and request better website content and how to combine behavioral data and storytelling structure to improve that content. Before we dive in, a few housekeeping notes. During the presentation, you will be in a listen-only mode as this webcast is being recorded. If you have a question during the presentation, you may submit it by using the Q&A tab. At the close of the presentation, we will address your questions as time permits. If we do not get to your question, we will reply to you via email. So without further adu, Eric, please take it away.
Thank you, Court. Like you said, my name is Eric Odom. I am a web developer with Augusta University. And real briefly, we're going to talk about where our websites tend to go wrong, what we can do to make better content, and then how we go about requesting that content. So let's get started. This is my refrigerator. You'll notice it's got a lot going on. And what it has is not very organized. And a lot of the information on there is outdated. We tend to have save the dates for dates that have already passed. You'll notice there's a whiteboard calendar. It's empty and it says April, and it's not even this past April. And there's not really a purpose. Most of the stuff on our fridge just goes there because we have nowhere to put it. So that's where it goes because we have it. And it gets this way because we add content at a faster rate than we remove it. And the whole thing is very counterintuitive. There are so many things vying for my attention that nothing actually gets my attention. So none of this really serves a purpose. And I bring this up because our websites, if we're not careful, tend to become like this. I mean, higher ed websites in general are just behemoths of information. We're made up of multiple colleges, often multiple departments, multiple units. Each of them have their own agenda, their own audience, and even sometimes their own thoughts on how the website should be utilized. And then it becomes an instance of too many cooks. I think one of the things that leads to that is we don't do a good job of actually defining what our website is for. So why don't we do that? Your website is possibly your best marketing tool for an external audience. And essentially, you need to let that audience know you're worth it because you're asking them to make a commitment. You want them to commit their time and or their money, and they need to know you're worth that. So everything that goes on your website should work towards that goal. And I would even argue that anything not working towards that or not working towards that goal is actually working against it. So you have various audiences. You have prospective students and their families, because let's not forget, you also need to sell your institution to the families of many of those students. Potential faculty and staff, and you want community and alumni support. So all those audiences are very different, but they have one thing in common. They're all human, and therefore they all possess a human brain. I can say that with 100% certainty. So when we think about how our brain works, it takes in data all the time. And because that, it's also constantly just tossing out data. Anything it feels is unnecessary. Most of that is information it feels is not necessary to our own survival or our success. That's why you can walk into a room that's unfamiliar, but instinctively know where any exits may be, but you won't know how many chairs or how many lights are in the room because it's unimportant. It's why you can sleep through white noise, but the sound of footsteps or a door opening will wake you up. Also, our brains love dopamine. We love feeling good. We love being rewarded for our actions. It's why we have compulsory habits with our electronic devices. And I bring that up because your website will always be in competition with the very device it is being viewed on. You are trying to grab an audience's attention against push notifications, message notifications, and just the potential to click over to something else. It's also why we have admittedly unhealthy relationships with a lot of social media, because we can get near instant feedback on our actions, or we can just continue to scroll and be fed with information that we've subscribed to. and it creates a dopamine loop because we enjoy that. And so think about how people interact with your site. As long as they're being rewarded for their actions, as long as they're finding the information they're looking for, they will stay engaged. But the moment information is non-existent or becomes too difficult to find, you break that dopamine loop and you give them the opportunity to exit without completing their task. And it's possible they may never return. So why don't we just give them what they're looking for? With exception of news and blogs, people aren't coming to your site for a casual read. Matter of fact, people don't read websites, they scan. They'll look it over in a Z-shaped pattern, then read through your content in an F or E-shaped pattern. So they're looking for information, they want to answer questions, and you need to make that information easy for them to find. So don't bury it under unimportant content. This could be too many pages. Statistically, it's going to be pretty split on how people navigate your site. About half your visitors will use traditional navigation, about half will use search. It tends to be divided by age and gender. Regardless of how they're looking for content, for information on your site, they need to be able to find it. You need to make it easier for them to find. So that may be fewer pages. That may be getting rid of unnecessary or outdated pages. It may require you to get rid of duplicate pages. For instance, a lot of your faculty may have dual appointments, but do they need a bio page for every department they're working under, or can that information be stored in a centralized place? This may even be just excessive content on a page. It seems that we have a habit of preceding every noun with 5 adjectives. For instance, if you have a new learning center, that's great, advertise that. But does it have to be a new, state-of-the-art, one-of-a-kind, cutting-edge, next-level, hands-on learning center? Or are you burying your information under just unnecessary word salad? People should be able to come to your site, go to a page, and find what they're looking for without having to sift through too much, without breaking that dopamine loop. Also, a little more about your brain. We spend almost half of our waking hours daydreaming. Typically between 30 and 40% of our time, our brain is just telling us a story where we get to be the hero, we get to be the protagonist. Also, we tend to make decisions based on emotion rather than logic. It's why internet hoaxes are so successful. It's why some of us may have dated someone who we knew wasn't good for us, but we swore we loved them, so we dated them anyway. It's also why my wife chose the college she did. She went to a great school, don't get me wrong, and on paper, everything about that school was right, but that's not why she went. As a young girl, she was a fan of their football team, and she grew up wanting to be a part of that nation. She then fell in love with the city the school was located in. Also, that school was far enough away from home to give her a sense of independence, but close enough where she could easily drive back home to visit friends and family if she felt the need. Again, she went to a great school and got a great degree, but the catalyst for her decision was how that school made her feel. So think about that. How does your school make people feel? And tell that story. Mark it on that. All right. So if people are spending half their time daydreaming, how do we get their attention? We're already competing with the device they're viewing the site on. Now we have to compete with their own brains. Well, people are less likely to daydream when engaged in story. It's why we get so caught up in good books and good movies. Think about it. If we're being told a story, our brain is preoccupied and it's not going to write a story. But our brain's going to write that story anyway. So let's use that. Use some copy and images that let your audience picture themselves there. For instance, saying something like, we create the next generation of professionals, many of whom go on to excel in their career. That's good copy. There's nothing wrong with that. But what if we took that exact same copy, changed a few pronouns to second person, and now you can say, let us make you into the next generation of professional who will go on to excel in your career. Essentially, you've said the same thing, but now you've gone from saying it about your institution, and now you're saying it directly to your audience. Same thing with images. A group photo of your poli-sci faculty, regardless of how photogenic they may be, is probably just taking up space on a web page and not doing a whole lot of work. So instead, replace an image like that with an image like from the back of a podium. And now I can picture myself giving a speech, winning a debate, or possibly even addressing my first town hall as senator. because you've spoken into that story. You've made me the protagonist of the story that your site is telling. And let's not forget, story creates emotional connection. We love dopamine, we love feeling good. And also emotion creates memories. So use story. It's why This Is Us, it's such a largely successful TV show. So what emotional stories do you have to tell? Do you have a mother and daughter graduating at the same time? Then tell that story. Do you have a medical student whose main motivation is finding a cure for their sibling's disease? Then tell that story. Connect with people on an emotional level. And I would like to just add, for more information on this, I would check out Building a Story Brand. It's a great book, good podcast. They dive really deep into this. Got to give credit where credit is due. Also, when you think about it, you're asking people to make a commitment. You're wanting your audience to commit time, money, possibly years of student loan debt. So look at your website like it's your dating profile, and by that, your site needs to go beyond just being attractive and colorful, and it needs to have a good personality. It can't just be pretty. Think about it. If you make a pretty website or a pretty web page and it lacks any well-defined purpose, then it's nothing more than a Kardashian. And I'm pretty sure we've reached our limit on Kardashians. So let's make a good first impression. One, don't welcome me to a web page, but make me feel welcome. What I mean by that is, saying welcome to whatever, blah, blah, blah. It feels kind of outdated. The other is usually welcome to is followed by a list of boastful statements. So instead of that, make me feel welcome. You should know what I'm looking for. Lay that content out in a clear and concise manner. And also, don't just talk about your accomplishments. Go back to the dating analogy. Think about sitting across the table from someone and all they do is boast about how great they are. Instead, talk about what you can help your audience to accomplish. Tell me you're great, but also let me know why you'd be great for me. Why are you the better choice? Because pretend, and rightfully so, just imagine that your audience has their choice of any of your competition. Why should they choose you over all of their other choices? Also, the way you prioritize your content, it says a lot. If I go to a program page and I have to scroll past the information about the program director, past a list of achievements and accreditations, through that, and then finally get to information about the education I'm looking for, one, good luck getting me to scroll that far, because most people only concentrate on the first couple of paragraphs. And second, you've shown me what's important to you. And you've implied that my education is the least important thing that this program provides. Also, you want me to make a commitment, ask for that commitment. So if you want someone to enroll in a program, the button for them to do that, or the method for them to do that, needs to be easy. It needs to be easy for them to find. Put at the top and the bottom of the page, you have to put it in a little sticky button where the minute they make that decision, they can follow through. Because the more steps you put between making that decision and following through, you run the risk of breaking that dopamine loop, and then I can exit without ever completing that task. So that was kind of a brief run through on how we can create better content. Now the challenge: how do we get that content from the people who have it? I offer this with no guarantee, because your institution is different. You're going to know how your institution works. You're going to know about the personalities. You're going to know about the different egos and the hurdles you have to go through. And I know from personal experience, sometimes it's hard to get people to listen to whatever advice you have to offer. A lot of times they just want to do what other schools are doing. And to that, I say use that to their advantage. So, if we can all adopt some of these practices and we just continue copying off each other's paper, then little by little, we can make some progress and move this whole conversation forward. So let's start by asking for better, or better, let's start by changing the literal conversation. I've been in so many meetings where people tell me what they would like on a web page or what they would like for a new website. I have meeting notes where it lists things like photo carousel, photo gallery, parallax images, Twitter embed, colors. But it lacks any actual content. So let's change that conversation. Instead of asking what would you like, say what would you like to accomplish. We have a new we're doing a site redesign. All right, if the purpose of this is to increase enrollment, then let's justify how everything going on this page will work towards that goal of increasing enrollment. Also, I would like to say, from experience, we need to stop using the word content. Typically, when someone tells me they have content, or when I ask someone for content, they give me photos and ideas. So instead, I recommend asking for what exactly is needed. It's like, oh, we're going to build out this homepage for a new unit. Okay, briefly tell me, like, what does this unit do? Give me just a brief description on who you are and how do you benefit your audience. Ask for the specific content you need, and in doing that, I would also recommend possibly replacing lorem ipsum text with instructions. Lorem ipsum has a purpose. I'm not calling for its death, but a lot of times what it does, it works against us, because if you don't have any actual text on the page, then people are starting to focus on layout and graphics and images, and that's where they will offer up their opinions. So instead, replace that lorem ipsum text with instructional text. What needs to go here? What kind of description are you looking for this part of the page? And lay that out, and then we fill in the blanks later. Also, if we're putting something on a page, is there anything we can take off? I've heard it said before that anytime you add an element to a page, you are automatically devaluing every other element on that page. So now would it be a bad time to ask, if you're going to add something new to a page, is there anything we can take off? Or if we're adding an additional page, are there any pages we can remove? Also, you're going to have to say no. So make an effort, and I'm saying this to myself as well, to accompany each no by a better alternative. Like, no, a photo carousel is not the best way to convey these images. What about a thumbnail gallery? Or no, 50 lab dissection photos is not the most appropriate content for our public-facing website, but I understand those students want to see this information. What if we put those in a shared box folder and they can access it and see those photos for themselves? Or no, your welcome page shouldn't be an 8-paragraph letter from the dean. What if we made that its own page so it gets all that space all to itself? So just a few suggestions. But at the very least, maybe some questions to start off with is, what do? You know, if we're creating a new department or a new unit and we need a web presence for that, all right, so what is this department? Essentially, how would you explain your institution to a stranger? And, you know, ask how they benefit their audience, because this not only gets them to identify who their audience is, but what benefits are you? Like, what can you help them accomplish? And really, what makes you stand out? Also, are there any requirements? Do people need any experience? Is this a job posting? Or is this a new class, a new program? What are the prerequisites? Does it require a commitment of money or time? You know, maybe we can start there and at the very least, answer these questions. All right. And I think that about does it. I think that was my time. So I guess I hand it back to Court and we'll answer some questions.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Eric. That was a great presentation. As you hit on, it's important to revise your web content and craft a narrative to engage your audience. We have a few questions here, so I'll just go ahead and dive right in. First one, Eric, how do you deal with people who want to use the website to archive old information?
Not in the way we would like. No, it's one of those, every no needs to be accompanied by a better alternative. Sometimes we have an intranet, so we tell them to put it there, or we tell them to put it in a box folder and point out, like, this way it can be seen only by the people who's seeing it. It's not going to come up in search results and maybe try to explain why. I would like to point out, it doesn't always work 100% across the board, but I try to find small victories in every person that agrees that maybe it should go on the internet, maybe it needs to go in a private folder, or even show like the web traffic and show that nobody's coming to this page. Maybe it can just be removed entirely.
Okay, great point. What are some ways to reduce duplicate information on the website?
I would say anything that seems to be frequently duplicated, work with ways to just centralize that content. One of the examples I used was faculty bios and showing up all over the site. So we had a team, did a great job, worked on a centralized faculty directory. And so not only does that make it easier for site visitors, but we point out it makes it easier for our content owners and content editors, because now there is one centralized source for that information, and people aren't having to keep up with multiple pages and make sure multiple pages are up to date.
Okay, that's a great point as well. All right, I got another one here. Can you please explain why you think welcoming people to a web page is so wrong?
I'm not entirely against it. I feel sometimes it is filler text for lack of better content. Welcome is nice. Personally, I feel it's outdated because it was nice when you had to log onto the internet and wait for a page to load, and it was a nice little greeting. But now when everything's always on and we're always connected, I feel it's better to just get straight to the point, because you're just putting possibly unnecessary words on a page, and you're making people have to scroll and sift through that to get to what they're looking for.
All right, we have a multi-part question here. First part, instead of putting a bunch of important content on one landing page, is it better to segment that into separate pages? And then the second part is, will people continue to click links deeper and deeper, or is there a point at which they would just stop despite being engaged with the information?
I would like to say, I wish I had a better answer for like how many links people will stop. I would equate that to scrolling, because there's, people have an argument whether content needs to be above the fold, or now that we can scroll easily, if that's a thing. I would say as long as there's reason for people to continue, then they're going to continue clicking links. But if you don't offer a better information, or if your links aren't outlined to say what's on the other side of that link, then I would make the assumption people aren't going to click. As far as putting information on a landing page, I think a landing page should be an at-a-glance overview of what you do. And from there, you can launch especially if it's a page that's going to have different audiences, you can send them to the proper areas. But I think by putting a lot of stuff on a page, not only do you devalue everything on that page and you have everything vying for your attention, but think about just regular non-higher ed websites. And a lot of times the things in the periphery, we're trained to view those as ads and clickbait, and we ignore those anyway. So I think by putting too much on a landing page, you're actually doing yourself a disservice. I hope that answered the question.
All right. Who owns the website? Does your university communications department take an active role in owning the site content?
Our web services team manages the site. Every department represented on the website, they are responsible and considered owners of their own content. And my boss will probably correct me if I'm incorrect on that. But to my understanding, they own their content, mainly because they would be the ones who know it better. We just try to provide the proper guidance as to what content needs to go on the site. And then we also have the provost office, which will very politely let departments know if they're putting content on a site that shouldn't be there.
All right, great. I think that wraps up the questions. I don't see any more coming in right at the moment. I do want to let everybody know that our OU Campus CMS helps make content editing, approvals, and publishing easy. If you'd like more information, please feel free to send an email to sales@omniupdate.com. One more question just popped in, Eric. Okay. How do you feel about FAQ pages?
I think they're better as standalone pages, but I guess it depends on how jumbled they are. If you can categorize your questions and make them easier, if it's so large, if you can, possibly even put like a search or a directory on the page, that's great. I would also recommend checking web traffic to see if those are even getting used. Personally, I think if the content did a great job at answering the questions, then FAQ pages can become smaller and possibly less necessary.
Can you drill in a little bit about what you talked about with analytics? What are you looking for to determine when you should keep a page or when you should delete a page or move a page?
Right now, we don't have uh, a standard, but I know I've gone into meetings where we can pull up a web page and look, like we'll go back for, the past quarter and see how many unique views and possibly like how many even views off campus or outside of our area it's had. For instance, without being too specific in case they end up hearing this, we had a page, there was a lot of importance put on its existence. And when you look at when you went and looked at the analytics, less than 1% of traffic to that particular college actually went to that page, or at least as far as unique page views, and very few people stayed on that page for long. So, it was pointed out that this is a page that may not be as necessary in its current state.
Great. I think we all have one of those pages somewhere. All right, I think that's it. Time has run up for this. If you did submit a question that was not addressed, we'll make sure to answer it offline. I would like to thank Eric for his time, and especially thank you to all of you for attending. A recording of this will be sent out to everybody that registered today, so you can share that with colleagues or refer back to some of the important information that Eric covered today. Again, thank you for attending, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.